Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to make my Gran's special shortbread. This was a secret family recipe, but I've decided that it's so good, must let everybody try it, or at least try and make it. So today what we're going to need is we're only going to need 6 ingredients. Those are butter, unsalted, castor sugar, I've just opted for this one. We've got icing sugar, plain flour, corn flour, and one which is a wee bit harder to get is semolina. Now semolina is like what they would use on like pizzas. So like say for example Domino's, I believe Domino's uses semolina to coat the bottom of the pizza to make it more crisp rather than, you know, burnt. Some places you get them and it's a wee bit burnt. So they are the 6 ingredients we're going to use. Heater oven, fan oven, roughly 155 degrees, and we'll cook the shortbread for 20 minutes and then sprinkle in some sugar and then cook it for another 25. Now this is a Scottish shortbread, so very good indeed. So this recipe is dead simple. All you need is a big bowl to mix it up and a tray. I roughly go for this tray that's about a 30 by 24. It doesn't really matter as long as it's around that size. Now this shortbread's not soft, it's more biscuity, which I prefer, but if you wanted to make it softer you could use honey or syrup in this mixture once we're done, and that'll give it a more softer taste rather than the nice biscuit which I'm opting for. So I'll set this tray aside. First thing we're going to do is we're going to heat the oven for just up, and I'm going to do it for 155 degrees roughly. Okay, next thing to do, take off any jewellery that you might have on. First thing we're going to do, grab our scales. That's another thing I forgot. Now this butter here is exactly 250 grams, so we won't need to weigh it because it's, well, pointless. So I'm going to cut up the butter into just small, tiny cubes so that it's easier to mix it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the cream first. So we're going to put the butter and the castor sugar and the icing sugar in, mix it up into a kind of creamy consistency, and then we're going to put in some corn flour, plain flour, and semolina. The semolina is a really important bit. That's what makes it, in my opinion, much nicer. Now I've left this butter out to kind of sit so that it's a soft texture. You can see it's cutting right like a knife through butter. Okay, so I'm just chopping it up into wee squares. They're kind of now in like sticks. You could slice it along, which I am actually going to do. There we go. So now it's wee tiny cubes. So I'm, well, not really, but mostly, because I've cut it at a really bad angle. Anyway, put that aside. Next thing we're going to need is around about, this recipe is quite an old recipe, so it's in ounces, but we're going to weigh out around, oh, sorry, almost forgot. The last thing you'll need is a sieve. Now we're going to sieve the icing sugar, castor sugar, the plain flour. Probably won't need to sieve the corn flour, and the semolina is quite already quite fine. So what we'll do is we'll weigh out 70 grams of castor sugar, roughly 70 grams of castor sugar. So what we'll do is we'll just dump this into this sieve, and we're just kind of making sure it's nice and fine. So you can kind of push the last wee bits through. There we go. I'll set that aside. Next thing I do is I grab this again, and I want to weigh out around 70 again. This recipe's got a lot of 70s. 70 grams of icing sugar. or about 2 ounces if you're measuring ounces. This one you probably most definitely will need the sieve. So I'm just, oh gosh. Very powdery, straight in my eyes. I would say that's about 70 there. So I'll put that back. Oh gosh, I've got it everywhere. Oh my goodness, I've got it everywhere. Oh gosh. Okay, so we've got about 70 grams there. Get that in this sieve. So we'll now set this behind, set this aside, as this is not so important right now. So I'm just sieving it up, making sure it's nice and fine, and then these last bits just give a wee dab. So I've just sat that aside in here, as don't get rid of the scale, we will need it. I'm tasting icing sugar, it's went everywhere. So now I will dump this butter in. Oops, still in the kind of, oh gosh, I've got it everywhere. So I've dumped it in the side, and what we want to do is we want to crumb it up, make sure it's nice and fine, crumb. So I'm breaking up all these wee buttery bits. As you can see, butter's nice and soft because I've left it out. Sometimes I forget to leave it out and it doesn't come out so well. So now what we're doing is we're just pressing it in, kind of mixing it in. We want to make this nice and creamy. I'll fast forward till, actually I won't, I'll time lapse it till we have made it a nice creamy consistency. As you can see, it's starting to turn more creamy, less powdery, more creamy, which is exactly what we want, as this will then mix with the rest of the ingredients to kind of more creamy. Now we want to make sure we don't have any just big lumps of butter in it, as well, nobody really wants to eat a big bit of butter. So as you can see, I'm kind of making sure I've got all this flour up, or all this icing sugar and castor sugar. There we go. Kind of feeling for any lumps. You see there's wee lumps here. Nope. Okay. I think that's us almost got them all. And made sure all the icing, we're almost at the right consistency that we want. Again, getting rid of any of that butter that's still kind of clumps in. There you go, and that's kind of what we're wanting. We're wanting no big clumps of butter, but then nice and kind of mixed together, soft and sticky. Okay, now if I was smart, I would have measured everything else out before I started this and just dumped it in, but I was not that smart, so I'm going to have to kind of clean it off my fingers. This is not a smart thing to do with a knife, but as long as we don't want to lose any of this. Now, I recommend if you're doing this at home, you'll want to make sure you measure out the semolina, measure out the corn flour, and measure out the plain flour as well, so that you don't have to do what I'm doing right now. Okay, so now what we want to do is we set this aside. So I'll set this over here, and we want to measure out every other ingredient, because what we're going to do is we're going to add it slowly. We're not just going to add it all at once. So let's start with the biggest thing. Let's get our around 300 grams of plain flour. Now watch, this will probably go everywhere, just like everyone else. There we go. So I'm just going to measure out 300 grams of plain flour. And then we'll want to sieve this into this bowl. I wish I had a wee bit bigger bowl, but oh well. Now the reason why we're putting it in a separate bowl is so that we can add it gradually, not just have a big mix of flour in our creamy butter. So whilst I just sieve that down, you can see I'm getting these big lumps because you wouldn't want that in your mix. There you go. And then you got the last wee ones, you can push them in. As you can see, I made a mess, as usual. Next, we want corn flour. So we're wanting around 70 grams of corn flour again. Same as most of the other stuff. Right, I'd say that's about 70 grams. I really wish I had a bigger bowl for this, sadly. Yeah, so I'll just put that in. Because it would be better to have this all in one bowl, but oh well. Again, setting it down to kind of all the last wee bits, and then just pressing them in. And lastly, the most important ingredient in my opinion, the semolina. Now you probably don't need to sieve it, but I'm going to just sieve it anyway since the sieve is there. So 70 grams of semolina, there we go. I would say that's about 70 grams. We'll set this over here, out the way, same with this. So I'll just grab the sieve, put this in, and as you can see, absolutely no, well as you can see there, no issues with having to actually sieve it because it's so fine. So now, that's everything there. So set this scale aside, we don't really need it. The problem is, we need to mix the plain flour, the semolina and the corn flour. We don't want to just add plain flour in. So this would have been really nice if we had another bowl. Sadly we did not. So this is a mess waiting to happen. I'm not getting any corn flour at the bottom. Right, I think that's as best as we're probably going to get it mixed, to be honest. Yeah, okay. See, that's probably the best. It's annoying, but that's what it is. So we've got this, the cream stuff now. So what we want to do is we're wanting to slowly add this in. So adding a little bit of time, about that much, and we're just kind of putting it in like it's breadcrumbs. Kind of rubbing it in, rubbing it in, rubbing it in. Okay. See, still wet, so we add more in a minute. There we go. So if we just grab the bowl, go like this, getting some more in. There we go. That's probably too much at once, but oh well. See, we're just kind of mixing it in. That was most definitely too much at once, but see, we're making it more of a kind of bready, like kind of consistency. Still sticking to my fingers, but we can see starting to mix it up, and it's becoming less creamy and more, as I've just said, bready. So if I get this off my fingers, then we then take a wee bit more. Oh, too much again. Yeah, I've not forgot about that wee tiny bit off to the side of that knife from when we had to wash our hands, but I'll add that in probably between the next one. Once it stops sticking to my hands, there's more kind of coming off. So you can see we're kind of rubbing it in like we're kind of, see, you're rubbing your finger and your pinky together, or the rest of the fingers, and you're kind of rubbing it in like it's bread. We're wanting it to be less sticky and more like a kind of dough that we can form, and we'll form it into that tray that we discussed earlier. Taking a small clump, rubbing together, small clump, rubbing together. There we go, it's starting to come off my fingers, so it's not as sticky as it was earlier. Still is, but not as bad. Yeah. Okay, so what I'll do is just grab this knife with that wee extra bit and kind of rub that in there, because I don't want any to go to waste. Also, I'm going to take the ones off the bowl that I had put in. So put half this last bit in. I think that might have been too much. Oh, that's on my shirt. So we can see as we're kind of mixing it in, it's coming quite dry, which is what we want. Right, so that's the kind of texture we're starting to want, although we don't want to waste any of that flour. You can see, make sure you're mixing right the way at the bottom. You can see I've left wee bits of bread, well, wee bits of flour, which we don't want to waste, but we also don't want to kind of not be mixed in, because we could at any point, don't really want a big mouthful of flour, do we? Just rubbing in, rubbing in, rubbing in, rubbing in, rubbing in, rubbing in. I don't want to waste any of these wee bits. I cleaned the table before I started this, so that if any bits drop out, we can still reuse them. Just going to quickly close that window. Okay, rubbing in. Now you probably actually don't need that last wee bit of flour that's sitting there, but waste not, want not. So we will make sure we grab all this kind of butter that's left, any that's on the knife. Okay, and last wee bit. There we go. Make sure we grab the bits at the bottom. As you can see, we've got like wee bits of flour here, which needs kind of mixed in. Like, see? So we want to make sure all of that's mixed in. Right, and I'll mix this in until it's at the right consistency. So at this point you could add honey if you want it to be less biscuity. honey or maple syrup or just regular syrup or whatever, something. But at this point in time, I'm not going to bother. You'd probably add maybe a teaspoon if you really wanted it to be less biscuity. But now what I'm doing is, instead of breadcrumbs, I'm kind of forming it together, making it into kind of one big ball. You can see we're making it into one big ball, forming it all together. Because we'll now put this ball into the tray, and once it's kind of formed, put it into the tray and get that in the oven. Well, we have to prick it with a fork, but then we can get it in the oven. Okay, so you can see, kind of forming it together. Don't want it to kind of break apart like that. We want it to be a big one. Don't necessarily want any waste, so make sure you grab that tiny bit at the bottom of the bowl. Try to get as much as you possibly can. There we go. Okay. Now we put the ball in, and we're wanting to use our knuckles to kind of form it into the corners. So we're slowly but surely forming it into corners. I am going to wipe that table. Get a flat surface, because I think that was struggling there. So I'm just using my knuckles to form it into what we're looking for. So right away in the corner, we want to make sure we get all the corners. Don't want it too thick in any areas, so I'm just pressing it down here. Again, pushing into the corners. See, now we're in that corner. So just a wee game where we're kind of forming it into the corners we're looking for. See, so I'm about to get it in that corner. And we want a kind of uniform thickness to it. Now you might be thinking, geez, oh, this is quite small, but and thin. This looks quite thin, but when we put it in the oven, it will slightly rise up. Not by much, but it will slightly rise up. So it won't be as thin as we think it will be, or we can see right now. So you can see I'm making sure it's uniform around the edges and in the middle, and pushing into the corners. Try and make sure it's all covered. So there's a wee bit here, you can use that to push into the corners. Now this shortbread lasts probably, you're talking, you could keep it for ages. Shortbread keeps for ages, so you could keep it for even up to 3 weeks if you put it in a sealed container. After that, you could keep it longer, but I wouldn't recommend it if I'm being honest. There we go. So as you can see now, we made it in all the corners, so I'm just flattening it down slightly so it's a uniform thickness, so some bits don't cook faster than others, it cooks at a uniform rate. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly wash my hands and see where we go from here. Okay, so now that we've got this nicely packed in, we'll take a fork and we just want to make uniform wee slits like this along it. This gets the air into the mixture and makes sure that it is kind of cooked throughout. Also helps it rise up. Now you don't want to go too far in where, like say for example you go way too far in and you scrape the bottom of the tray. Don't want that. Another thing which we should have done, which I completely forgot about, is we take the packet of the butter like this and rub it along the tray. I completely forgot, so it might stick to the bottom. Actually, will most likely stick to the bottom, but oh well. That's the way it is. So you can see if you get like, say, fingers of shortbread, the reason why they've got, you'll often see these wee marks like this, like a fork. I mean, they'll be done in like a big machine, but it's much the same. It's just to get the air to the rest of the mixture. There we go. Now I really should have buttered the bottom of the tray. I completely forgot, but let's hope it's alright. So if your oven's heated up, we'll put it in the oven for 150 for 20 minutes. Or 155 to 160. Okay, so we're now approaching the 20-minute mark. So what we want to do is we want to take a tiny bit of caster sugar, because we'll spread it on top of the shortbread, and then we'll cook it for another 25 minutes. So I'm just putting a tiny bit. Okay, that's way too much. It's way too much. Give somebody a heart attack with it. That's probably enough, so just a few grams just for a sprinkle. So I'll now pull the shortbread out the oven. You can see it's starting to look more like shortbread. We do have kind of browning towards the corners, and you might not be able to see it, but there's a slight raise towards this side and this side, so I've clearly not moved it enough. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll take a wee bit of caster sugar, and we kind of want to sprinkle it on. Not too much. Oh, that was too much in that spot. And you want to make sure you get it everywhere, even the corners. Because the one thing you don't want is just to be eating straight sugar, but you also don't want it to be completely dry. Okay, that's probably enough. So I've kind of got it everywhere, kind of relatively evenly. Another thing we'll do is we'll take the knife, and we're just going to kind of cut it into the shapes and sizes you want right now, whilst it's soft, because when it comes to hardening, it'll be a bit harder to break them apart and break it. So we're just going to slightly edge into it the sizes we want. Not too deep, just slightly. You can see it's still soft, so it's not too thin. Yeah, about that. So you can see I'm just edging it in. Just keep edging. Always just keep edging. Oh, that bit's probably a bit too big. So you want slightly in, but not too much. So you can see I've sort of cut it, but not too hard in, that's such a way that it would be basically break up in the oven. So I'll put that in the oven for another 25 minutes. Okay, so that's been about 25 minutes. As we can see, the shortbread is quite kind of crisped up. The corners aren't too solid, so I hate biting into shortbread where it's hard, but it doesn't seem too soft. Now we're just going to take a wee fork to just check. Yeah, so it probably needs a wee bit longer. It's fine around the edges. It does harden up as it cools, but I would say it probably needs another minute or two. So we'll put it back in the oven. Okay, so I've just took this out of the oven, and what we want to do is we want to check if it's kind of cooked and not too soft. So I've got this, it's like a kind of cake piercer, and what you do is you pierce it in, and you don't want any to resistance. And what you're wanting to look at is you're wanting to see if there's anything left on it when you pull it out. Now, I don't know how well this is zooming. I'll come over. I don't know how well this is zooming up. Let's see, there we go. but there's hardly any on this fork other than sugar. So that means I think that's ready. Now we already have kind of cut it up. What we'll do is we'll take the knife to it again and we'll just kind of break it up even more so that whilst it's still fully soft, we'll just kind of send the knife through so that when we do come to break it up, it just is dead easy. I'm also cutting around the edges so that when it does time to come out, it's not too kind of stuck to the tin. Okay, so what's happened now is I've took it out and I've let it cool in the tray for a wee while, but I'm going to now set it on this cooling rack just to make sure that it cools at the bottom as well. I'm going to put it on top of this tray just because I don't really want crumbs falling about. It's a lot more to clean up, but in terms of just a cooling rack like that, you can just set it down on the table and it wouldn't matter unless you really cared like I do right now. So what I'll do is I'll move the shortbread off this and onto that. So the first piece is always the hardest to get out, but then afterwards you've kind of got it. There we go. So you can see, look, nice and easy to take out, a little bit crumbly, but break it apart and boom, on the rack like that. So I'll just continue this for the full tray. You can see easily coming out, just a break and put it on the tray. Now that's why we gave it a cut earlier in the video. It's just so that it could easily be removed from the tray. Now it's still a little soft in bits, but it will harden up as it cools. You can see around here it was either not mixed properly or to be honest it's just breaking apart. So I don't have enough room on this cooling rack actually, and I can't put it the opposite direction just because it's getting, actually I could, there you go, I'll just do that. Okay, so I'm just moving all the shortbread off out of this tray, getting a bit harder to get out as I go along. And if you really wanted to, you could grab a wee piece of it now. There you go. See? So see, you've got nice consistency at the bottom, and then we just break apart for this. And you can see it's nice, not soft, nice and firm, not too firm where it's like it's rock solid. Yep, so just keep putting it on the tray. As you can see, we've got absolutely plenty from that tiny amount of materials, and for it being dead simple. There we go. Okay, so we got so much that this tray was completely pointless, but yeah, oh well. There we go. So I'm just moving it onto this tray to get it all cooled. You can see we've got absolutely loads of it. And then these crumbs, don't necessarily put them to waste, you can always, nice. Okay, so I'm just going to not bother with the tray. Let's get rid of the tray, and then we just have it sit for, well, until it cools, and then you can enjoy. And as you can see, we've got absolutely plenty of it. So that was Gran's Scottish secret recipe for shortbread. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed making it. If you can put in the comments how you got on and what you think of it, whether you added honey and syrup to make it less biscuity, or whether you just enjoyed it as it is. Anyway, hope you enjoy the video and like and subscribe. Delicious.